So one of the passages that stood out to me this year, actually the last 2 years as we've been engaging in this subject of tribal mission, is Isaiah 49, verse 6. So I'm just going to get it. So it says, "Is it too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob, or the tribes of Israel, and bring back those of Israel I have kept? I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." And in this nation, for the last 40 or 50 years, we've been involved, many of us have been involved, many churches have been involved in what's been described as the charismatic movement, or the restoration movement, or the third wave movement, things like Vineyard, New Frontiers, New Wine, and those kind of styles. And behind that, there's been a lot about restoring the tribes of Israel, or restoring the church, or restoring us, or renewing us. And what I like about this passage is it says, it's too small a thing for you to only be people who restore the tribes of Israel. But I'm also going to now make you a light to the Gentiles and those who are far off. And that's really the subject of a lot of this gathering this weekend. How do we begin to engage with the tribes of people that are not just the tribes of people who've already been in a relationship with God for a long time, who've already grown up with some kind of Christian heritage, but those who are far away. It's interesting what's happening right now, kind of the big shifts that are happening politically. New Forms is not partisan, by the way, so as a group we have people here that would probably be on both sides of the line in terms of their voting and what they would have liked in terms of whether Britain would have remained or exited Europe, and what people think about whether Trump should have been president or not. There'll be people here that would probably have very diverse opinions. But one of the things that I noticed through this is that both in the Brexit campaign in Britain and Europe and in America, there'd be probably a big surprise amongst different quarters that there's voices that are quite different from those of our own. And what's being unearthed in this kind of tectonic shifts of politics is that there's values that different people have and almost tribal affiliations. And so sometimes when these tribes and voices are kind of ignored, it seems like, okay, everybody's on the same type of plane. Everybody has the same ideologies. Everybody has the same value system. Isn't it obvious that we should remain in? Or isn't it obvious that we should remain out? Isn't it obvious that somebody like Trump shouldn't be in? Isn't it obvious? And so what it brings up is that actually there's different tribes and different value systems, and there's different voices that probably are different to those of our own. And are those voices being heard? Are those voices being represented in Christian circles? One such voice, set of voices was a few years back when the riots occurred in the UK. That was sparked by the death of my wife's cousin that was shot by police. Again, there was it was the same with Martin Luther King, that riots are the language of the unheard. And there's a whole lot of voices that are not being heard by society. And whether or not you agree that that should then mean that people take to the streets and riot, there's a lot of voices that I don't hear articulated in a lot of our churches, or in our political institutions, or in the media. On the other extreme, and so we've done stuff with young people and others in communities that if you ask the question, are we unfairly discriminated against by the police, their answer would be yes. Whereas there's other people who would not see that at all, would say, you know, the police are there to do good, to uphold people in society. But there's a whole set of people that is not the case for, not just in America, but here in the UK. And how are their voices being amplified? And that's something that we want to look at when we engage in tribes and people who are far outside of the boundaries of what we've been used to as churches in this country for the last 40 years. On the other side, my dad was a Hells Angel. So my mum was black and my dad was a Hell's Angel. He hated black people. He hated anything to do with God. And if you mentioned anything to do with God, he would throw the chairs at the wall. They'd go around smashing up pubs. And his kind of voice is also a voice that I don't hear very often in Christian circles. You know, how are we engaging people like that? And so there's some voices like that may be coming up in America, and some voices like that are coming up in the UK. So you've got these sets of voices on probably extreme sides that really as churches we've not probably been engaging with at all. So then it comes as a shock when these voices rise to the surface. So that's not a statement as to whether I think that what they are saying is right or wrong. It's just a fact that there's some underlying currents and voices of peoples out there that I wonder as church in the UK or Europe or the West, whether we've been engaging those people groups. And what would it mean for us to begin to be a light to the Gentiles or those who are far off and outside of our current circles? Sometimes when we're with the same people all the time, we tend to start having the same kind of values. And then we start to think that that is the norm for everybody. But there's a whole set of people out there that don't have the same values as we might have had in the last 40 years being in the same kind of church circles that we've been in. We've been looking at the past in the last 10 years at things like pioneer mission and multiplication, and you know, how to find people of peace that are already embedded in their communities, how to come alongside them and coach them and help them to make disciples of their communities and see it replicate in a DNA of multiplication. So we've done a lot of that in the early days. Me and others have written books about it. And then a few years ago we started to look at the whole subject of kingdom mission and what it means to be kingdom influencers in the spheres of society, like in media, like in arts, in politics and so on. And as I say, this last 2 years we started to look at this whole area of tribal mission. One, do we know what tribes we belong to? Because we all have ideological tribes that we connect with. Sometimes it's obvious, you know, in terms of if you support certain football teams or certain types of bands, but it's becoming even more clear with these kind of political divides that are happening right now. There are different tribes. Ultimately, the kingdom is broader and beyond tribal distinctions. But to engage people, we need to understand the tribes that we're engaging. So we've also been praying into this whole thing of what's it going to take to build an ark to rescue and disciple generation X, Y, and Z in Europe, and all the tribes that are completely unreached. What's that going to take? And welcome to New Forms Gathering 2016.